අද්විතීය 200 Mbps ස්පීඩ් එකකින් ශ්‍රී ලංකාවේ වේගවත්ම සහ පුළුල්තම හෝම් බ්‍රෝඩ්බෑන්ඩ් සම්බන්ධතාවය වන SLT මොබිටෙල් දේශීය ෆයිබර් බලවේගය ඔබත් අදම අත්විඳින්න.
හරිම සුදුයි.
Tonight on First at 9, this Wednesday, the 17th of May, 2023. Beyond targets, President Ranil Wickremesinghe confident that Sri Lanka can achieve results surpassing goals set out by the IMF with proper implementation of government's policy. Positive. Debt restructuring talks with Sri Lankan authorities continuing positively, says the Chinese Foreign Ministry. Court proceedings. Attorney General files claim in High Court of Singapore over the Express Pearl incident involving 6 defendants. New appointments. President Ranil Wickremesinghe appoints new officials to governor positions of Northwestern, Eastern and Northern provinces.
Alliance Finance මෙතුරු රන්නයි සේවාවෙන් රන් පවුම්කට රුපියල් 1,70,000ක ඉහළ අධිකාරම.
ඔබේ විශ්වාසය දිනු සෙන්සුරයින් දැන් ළඟමැති ෆාමසියෙන් ලබාගත හැක.
This is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to First at 9. I am Shanella Fernando in your top stories for tonight. President Ranil Wickremesinghe expressed confidence that the proper implementation of the government's policy program would lead to economic prosperity surpassing the goals set by the International Monetary Fund. During a meeting with ministry secretaries and provincial chief secretaries, the president emphasized the importance of restructuring state-owned companies to ensure a prosperous economy and urged ministry secretaries to support the government's policy program rather than protecting companies under their jurisdictions.
A meeting chaired by President Wickremesinghe with the ministry secretaries and provincial chief secretaries was held today at the presidential secretariat in Colombo.
බංකොලොත් වෙලා ආවේ රට. බංකොලොත් වෙන එකට හැම අමාත්‍යාංශයෙන්ම වග කියන්න ඕනේ. අපි කාලයක් තිස්සේ ගෙනිච්ච හැටියට පිට සිදු වුණා මුදල් දෙන්න මේ වැඩ කටයුතු කරන්නේ. ඒකෙන් මමත් හිටේ ආණ්ඩුවල ඒකෙන් සිදු වුණේ එක අතකින් ජනතාවේ මුදල් අපත ගියා. දැන් ඊට පස්සේ බංකොලොත් වෙන තරුණයන් අහන එක සාධාරණයි මොකද්ද මේ උනේ කියලා. දැන් ඉතින් උනේ එක උනා දේත් අපිට දැන් හරවා ගන්න පුළුවන් දන්න හැටියට මේවා හරියට ක්‍රියාත්මක කරගෙන යනවා නම් IMF තියෙන ඉලක්ක නෙමෙයි ඊට වඩා ඉහළින් අපිට යන්න පුළුවන්. පළවෙනි එක තියෙන්නේ IMF යෝජනා ක්‍රියාත්මක කරන්න. එතන ඉඳන් යන්න තියෙනවා ඇත්ත වශයෙන්ම ශීඝ්‍ර සංවර්ධනය. ඒකට අපි බෙන්ච්මාර්ක් කරා අන්තිමට 2048 මොකද්ද වෙන්න ඕනේ. පළමුවෙන්ම තියෙන්නේ මේ ලේකම්වරුන්ගේ කොමිටිය. දැන් අවුරුදු දශක දෙකක් තුනක් මෙතෙන්ට හම්බෙලා මේක සම්බන්ධීකරණයක් කරන්න. අමාත්‍යාංශවල වැඩ කටයුතු මෙතෙන්ට ගෙනල්ලා ඒවා කතා කරලා මොකද්ද කරන්න කියලා කරනවා. ඉතින් මම බැලුවේ ඒ ඔක්කොම අහෝසි කරන්න. දැන් මෙතෙන්ට ඇවිල්ලා වාද කළාට දැන් මට කැබිනට් මණ්ඩලයට කැබිනට් පත්‍රය එවනවා මේ මුදල දෙන්න අර මුදල දෙන්න ඕන කියලා. ඉතින් ඕක මොකද්ද වෙන්නේ? ඕක ගියාම යනවා දැන් මුදල් අමාත්‍යාංශ. ඉතින් කවුරු හරි එක්කෙනෙක් ඕක අරගෙන ලියලා ඊළඟට මොකද්ද ඉල්ලුවේ කියලා ලියලා තව පැරග්‍රාෆ් 3ක් ලියලා අන්තිමට කියනවා දෙන්න බෑ කියලා. ඕකනේ තියෙන්නේ. මෙතන ඇවිල්ලා මෙච්චරයි මුදල් දෙන්න පුළුවන්. ඉතින් කැබිනට් පේපර් දාන්න එපා. මගෙත් කාලේ යනවා මේවා කියවලා අත්සන් කරනකොට. නැතුව මේ පරණ පරිපාලන ක්‍රමේ නම් ගෙනියන්න බෑ. දැන් බලන්න තරුණ රට ඇවිල්ලා යනක අනාගතයක් නැහැ කියලා යනවා. ඒගොල්ලෝ දොස් කියන්න බෑ. මොනවා කරන්නද? දැන්ට පේන්නේ නැහැ. අපිට විශ්වාසය ඇති කරොත් මේ ඔක්කොම වෙනස් කරන්න පුළුවන්.
President Ranil Wickremesinghe has made 3 appointments naming new governors for the provinces of Northwestern, Northern and Eastern. Among them, PSM Charles, who previously held the position of Northern Province Governor, has been reappointed by President Wickremesinghe.
The governor positions of Northwestern, Northern and Eastern provinces in Sri Lanka were filled after the removal of their previous governors. Admiral of the Fleet Wasantha Karannagoda, Anuradha Yahampat and Jeevan Tyagaraja were relieved of their duties as the governors of the Northwestern, Eastern and Northern provinces respectively. Today, before President Ranil Wickremesinghe, the newly appointed governors for these 3 provinces took their oaths of office, signifying the official commencement of their responsibilities. PSM Charles, who previously served as the governor of the Northern Province in 2019, has been reinstated as the governor of the same province. Sendil Thondaman, the leader of the Ceylon Workers' Congress, has been appointed as the new governor of the Eastern Province. Lakshman Yapabe Vardhana, a former parliamentarian, has been appointed as the new governor of the Northwestern Province. This step taken by President Ranil Wickremesinghe follows the vacancies created by the removal of the previous governors, ensuring the continuity of the governance and administration in the Northwestern, Northern and Eastern provinces.
Positive communications between Sri Lanka and Chinese financial institutions regarding the debt restructuring of the island nation have been acknowledged by the Chinese Foreign Ministry. During a regular media briefing today, spokesperson Wang Wenbin emphasized China's commitment to supporting the debt restructuring efforts and urged all creditors to actively participate in the process and emphasized the importance of fair burden sharing among them.
We have stated our position on this matter multiple times. I want to reiterate that China supports our financial institutions in working with the Sri Lankan side, and we would like to continue to play a positive role. At the same time, we call on commercial and multilateral creditors to take part in the debt restructuring in Sri Lanka and share burdens in a fair way. It has been learned that the Sri Lankan government has said that it will discuss the matter with creditors, including China. China and Sri Lanka are in positive communication on this matter now.
The President's Media Division stated that the originating claim pertaining to the claim's action on merits of the Express Pearl incident was filed in the General Division of the High Court of Singapore, naming the Attorney General as the claimant. According to the Additional Solicitor General of Administration, Chethiya Gunasekara, the claim named 6 defendants and was filed on April 25th. 2023. The PMD said the case conference hearing was taken up before the General Division of the High Court of Singapore on the 15th of May 2023, and a further follow-up on the case conference has been scheduled for 1st of June 2023. The Attorney General's Department is currently exploring the possibility of transferring the case to the Division of the Singapore International Commercial Court under the rules of procedure of the SICC. The litigation of the Express Pearl incident is being handled by a Singaporean legal firm appointed and retained with the approval of the Cabinet Ministers to represent the interest of the government of Sri Lanka. Minister of Ports, Shipping and Aviation Nimal Siripala said it is important to make the Colombo port more efficient to attract more business operations. Speaking at an event at the Ports Minister said the Port of Colombo has seen a significant increase in the number of vessels visiting its terminals.
The vessel MV Wanghai A10 from the Taiwan shipping company Wanghai Fleet called at the Colombo port for the first time yesterday. The vessel, which arrived at the Colombo International Container Terminal, was ceremoniously welcomed by Minister of Ports, Shipping and Aviation Nimal Siripala da Silva and officials of the Sri Lanka Ports Authority. Speaking at the event, the minister said that the Port of Colombo has seen a significant increase in the number of vessels visiting its terminals. The minister added that the growth that has been observed in terms of vessel arrivals is due to the execution of strategic measures at the port, both long as well as short term. He emphasized that the port's position as the central hub port in the Asian region will be solidified through timely and successful completion of all the ongoing large-scale development programs at the port.
This is a landmark event for the Port of Colombo. This ship has 13,000 containers and this port is being used by this line, so that gives a highest credibility to our port. So therefore, we need to aware that our port must be more efficient than this. Because if we are more efficient, more and more vessels, more and more liners will use this port. But if we are backward, then we will not be able to attract the vessels and the lines, though we are in a very dynamic geographical position in the Indian Ocean. So the Port Authority is doing its best to provide the necessary infrastructure facilities for automation and for utilization, etc. And we will be introducing a community management system for this port very soon, which will eradicate a lot of obstacles in this port.
Director of the Asia and Pacific Department of the International Monetary Fund, Krishna Srinivasan, says the IMF program is an opportunity for all Sri Lankans to work together to resurrect the country out of the crisis and restore economic stability and put Sri Lanka into a sustainable growth path. Addressing media during a special briefing in Colombo with the IMF delegation visiting Sri Lanka, Srinivasan said the governance diagnostic exercise on Sri Lanka was conducted on several key areas, including fiscal governance, financial sector oversight, and central bank governance.
As you know well by now, the reform program supported under the EFF arrangement is built on strong policy measures and prioritizes 5 key pillars. First, an ambitious revenue-based fiscal consolidation, which is accompanied by stronger social safety nets, fiscal institutional reforms, and cost recovery-based energy pricing to ensure the state's ability to support all its essential expenditures. Second, restoration of public debt sustainability, including through a debt restructuring to ensure stable financing of the government's operations. Third, a multi-pronged strategy to restore price stability and rebuild reserves under greater exchange rate flexibility to alleviate the burden of inflation, particularly on the poor, and to foster an environment of investment and growth, and to ensure Sri Lanka's ability to purchase essential goods from abroad. Fourth, policies to safeguard financial sector stability to ensure that the financial sector can play its key role in supporting economic growth. And fifth, structural reforms to address corruption vulnerabilities and enhance growth. Anti-corruption and governance reforms are imperative to ensure that the hard-won gains from the reforms benefit the Sri Lankan people. Sri Lanka is the first country in Asia that has undergone the IMF governance diagnostic exercise. The IMF governance diagnostic report is expected to be published by September this year. The mission visited Colombo in March and engaged closely with stakeholders and civil society organizations on this critical reform area. We look forward to further discussion with them on this issue. Commendably, Sri Lanka has already started implementing many of the challenging policy action in these areas. It is now essential to continue the reform momentum under strong ownership by the authorities and the Sri Lankan people more broadly. Economic impact of the reforms on the poor and vulnerable needs to be mitigated with appropriate measures. In this regard, we welcome the authorities' firm commitment to strengthen social safety nets, including through a minimum spending floor, well-targeted spending through the new social registry, and establishment of objective eligibility criteria. That the IMF-supported program is an opportunity for all Sri Lankans to come together to work through this crisis to restore economic stability and put the country on a sustainable growth path. The key is implementation.
Just to check on the interest rates for this loan, and is it same across all other countries, the interest rate that you all are giving?
It's actually a floating interest rate, so it depends on how global interest rates evolve, and so we can only make projections based on overall projections. So we've estimated that over the lifetime of the loan for 4 years until the repayment is taking place all the way up to 2037, it would average out to about 5%.
Governance diagnostic exercise, since it's the first in Asia, could you take us through what it entails?
This was done at the request of the authorities, and the governance diagnostic exercise will identify key governance weaknesses and corruption vulnerabilities that are macroeconomically critical, and this will be across 6 key areas. The 6 key areas include fiscal governance, financial sector oversight, central bank governance, market regulations, rule of law, and AML safety. You know what AML safety is, right? It'll also assess the adequacy of the anti-corruption framework and policies. So that is the scope and focus of the governance diagnostic. It will be completed, or the report will be done by September, and it will lay out recommendations on what can be done to improve the governance framework and reduce corruption in the country, and that will be factored into our program going forward.
We'll be back after this short commercial break.
ගොඩමඩ පෙරලි කරන බලපුළුවන්කාරයා මහින්ද්‍රා යුවෝ ඩීමෝ වෙතින්. වැඩම ගොඩයි ගොඩම තමයි. ස්වරාජ් ට්‍රැක්ටර් ඩීමෝ වෙතින්.
Welcome back in business news. The Colombo bourse ended flat today as gains in consumer staples companies offset losses in financial and industrial stocks. The all share price index closed flat to settle at 8,823.26 0.28 points. The S&P SL20 fell by 0.14% to settle at 2,539.17 points. Bukit Dara and Carson Cumberbatch were top boosts on the index, rising 15.09% and 7.94% respectively. However, Ceylon Tobacco Company, John Keel's Holdings and Sampath Bank were top losers, falling 1.34%, 0.72% and 1.96% respectively. Trading volume on the index rose to 36.2 million shares from 36.6 million shares in the previous session. The market turnover fell to 699 million rupees from 945.3 million rupees in the previous session. Consumer durables and apparel sectors were the top contributors to the market turnover, while energy sector was the second highest contributor. Foreign investors were net buyers, purchasing stocks worth 232.8 million rupees, while domestic investors were net sellers, offloading shares worth 479.9 million rupees. Now let's take a look at how the rupee traded against other major currencies during the day. Oil prices were steady on Wednesday after a surprise rise in U.S. crude inventories stoked demand concerns as economic worries competed with a tighter supply outlook for later in the year.
Oil prices were steady today after a rise in U.S. crude inventories stoked demand concerns. Brent crude futures rose 19 cents or 0.3% to $75.10 a barrel. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude was up 20 cents or 0.3% to $71.06. The International Energy Agency forecasted that in the second half of the year, demand will surpass supply by 2 million barrels per day, with China accounting for 60% of the increase in oil consumption. In reference to the American Petroleum Institute figures, U.S. crude stockpiles rose by about 3.6 million barrels in the week ended in May 12. After data revealed that retail sales increased by 0.4% in April, below expectations for an increase of 0.8%. There were already concerns about U.S. growth before the oil inventory build. In China, April industrial output and retail sales growth undershot forecasts, suggesting the economy lost momentum at the beginning of the second quarter. The narrative of the country's delayed recovery was supported by a variety of Chinese macroeconomic data for April, released on Tuesday, which continue to have a negative impact on the state of the oil market.
In response to concerns about the governance of Sri Lanka rugby and a breach of the World Rugby bylaws relating to political interference, the World Rugby Council has suspended Sri Lanka rugby from World Rugby membership with immediate effect. In a statement, the World Rugby Council stated that the Council and Asia Rugby agreed that the International Federation and Regional Association would work together with all stakeholders to ensure the least possible disruption of rugby in Sri Lanka. They say that the immediate priority is to work with all the relevant stakeholders to resolve the governance issues. It added that a resolution of these issues will enable Sri Lankan athletes and officials to participate in upcoming matches and tournaments in Asia. World Rugby and Asia Rugby will urgently work with all stakeholders to put in place a program of meetings to be held in Sri Lanka to hopefully resolve the current impasse, according to the World Rugby Council. With that, we wrap up tonight's edition of First at 9. Thank you for joining. I'm Shanella Fernando. Have a good night.
For news and information you can trust 24 hours a day, visit AdaDerana.lk.